It's really lovely to see friendly faces, and thank you, Joanna, for helping me choose the song. I have a real good feeling about being here, so this is lovely. I have actually put together an agenda, so now you get to tell me that I'm going off the topic. So you can remind me that this is what I promised to talk to you about. I tend to get carried away if there's something that really interests me today, and Julius gave me so many ideas that I might divert a little bit, but never mind. The idea is that we talk a little bit about sustainability, not just as, sustainability is nice, but what does it mean for business? Why is it relevant for business, and can it be seen as not as a hurdle, Julius, but as an opportunity as well?
Life was with purpose, it wasn't sustainability.
Okay, good. So Neste, people struggle to define Neste. I struggle to define Neste. We used to be an oil company, now we are a renewable company. This is actually what I'm here to talk about. What is the business transformation, and why does it make sense for a company to do a massive, massive change in who they are, and what the impact of that may be? Nowadays, people maybe already know that, okay, Neste, they have the gas stations, and then they also have this renewable diesel. But we've actually said that, that's not where we're stopping. So by 2030, we expect to have 3 big renewable businesses, looking at renewable polymers and chemicals, looking at renewable aviation fuel, and then the renewable diesel. And this is a transformation. So congratulations, Haarla, for 60 years. We are actually a little bit older even. We were founded in 1948 after the Second World War with the purpose of securing Finland's oil supply. It doesn't sound so far-fetched today as it did half a year ago when I talked about, what is Neste's purpose. And yet the purpose has changed. And I think when we say that today our purpose is creating a healthier planet for our children, I think that already says that we've come a long way from what we used to be. The transformation has taken a lot of time. Already in the 1990s, when oil business was still a very good business, but what people don't know about Neste is that we have about 25% of the staff working on R&D, innovation, engineering. So that's quite a lot of people trying to come up with something new. And they already, the brilliant women of the company already came up with this idea that we could actually make diesel out of renewable resources. And they presented that idea, but the company was sort of like, it might be cannibalizing our own business, but let's patent that idea and then put it on the side. And then in the early 2000s, and those of you who are old enough to remember, we had the previous big discussion on climate. And I'm assuming, I wasn't with Neste at the time, that they started thinking that what is the future business going to be like if everybody is going to be really concerned about climate? And then they started looking at what should we invest in? Should we invest in another production line for oil? Or should we really take a chance and look at all these innovation ideas that we've made and invest in a renewable diesel refining line? And this is what they decided. And it's a very bold decision if you think about, nobody was asking for this. Nobody knew what it was. There was no way of getting it on the market because you actually needed to also get approvals for a product that didn't exist. And yet the decisions were made, investments were put in place, and they started building refineries, not just in Finland, but also in Singapore and in Rotterdam. It wasn't always easy. It took about 10 years before this became the profitable side of the business. Nowadays, more than 90% of the profit comes from the renewables. This is not the end of the transformation, so we've also said that it's great that we're bringing a new, more sustainable solution to our customers, but we still need to look at what it is that we do ourselves. So we have our own climate strategy, looking at, how can we bring down our own emissions? We're looking at how can we expand the positive impact, the handprint of the company, by growing the renewables. We're looking at new kinds of businesses. I said that we're also looking at polymers and chemicals. There we also have the idea of chemically recycling plastics. So taking old plastic waste and turning that into the same grade of plastic as virgin plastics. Typically, when people think about plastic, they think about, oh, it's a problem. We have more plastics than fish in the sea. The problem is not necessarily the material. The problem is where it ends up. And then also plastics recycling, mechanical recycling solves many problems, but not all. So with chemical recycling, you can actually utilize the types of plastics that you cannot today mechanically recycle, and it becomes the same quality. So you can use it for medical purposes, you can use it for food. So there's also this innovation going on. How can we redesign recycling as well? So plenty of different problems that we are here to solve. So like I already said, creating a healthier planet for our children. And when you link that to a company like Neste, a lot of people are like, really? But I have to say that this is something that every single employee really firmly believes in. And this is what makes it so nice to work for a company where we have a joint purpose. And I think it's also a little bit what you said, Julius, that it's about creating a family. So Neste is not a family business, but it feels like a very tight community of people with shared values. And I think this helps in bringing these new weird innovation to the market. Sometimes we are there trying to convince the world that we're not insane. Well, me especially. But then, it helps when, for example, when I was being interviewed for the job, and I wasn't sure if I believed in Neste. And I asked the then CEO, so why had he chosen to join Neste? And he said that the purpose. And I felt that, I can run sustainability in a company where the CEO believes in this kind of purpose. We've also been recognized for the transformation. Like I said, our biggest sustainability transformation is the transformation of the company. We have all kinds of nice recognitions. For me, this is the most meaningful. So the Harvard Business Review, when they were looking at the most impact business transformations of the last decade, Neste is listed there. But this does not mean that we are somehow, woohoo, we're perfect and we're already done and we've done this on our own. No, you can only have a big impact if you actually find the right partners. Who are you going to be working with? Who are you developing new solutions with? Who's going to help you build these solutions? Who's going to help you scale them up? And it didn't always go so smoothly. Why do we need to understand also the business environment? Why do we need to care about NGOs? Because they fundamentally change also the perception of your business. They have a huge impact on the public opinion. This has a huge impact on new policies, regulations, etc. Having a decent dialogue is fundamental. And you also need to understand that most groups are genuinely trying to do something good. So having a dialogue. We, for example, then had a dialogue with Greenpeace. We've had good responses from them as well. I think for me, the best examples have been when we have had NGOs that have been really critical, and then we've had a good dialogue, and they've actually gone out to say that they believe in something that we do. And this is really, really important. We live in an era where a lot of people feel that, we are right, they are wrong, and I don't have to talk to them. And I think this is not helpful. It's not helpful for changing the world, and it's not helpful for creating a business that is successful in the future as well. So when I said that the transformation that we are on is continuing, so we are also participating in, for example, this World Business Council for Sustainable Development. And they had this big work last year on developing a vision for 2050. And this is it, we need to have more than 9 billion people living well within planetary boundaries by 2050. So this means that we need to be able to serve a lot more people and yet respect the planet. And this was also for me and my team when we started thinking, so how are we part of this solution? What is Neste going to do to help this vision come true? And then if that was too fluffy, this is how I explain these things to people that want to see a more business-minded way of explaining basically the same thing. So if you look at megatrends, there's going to be more people. There's going to be more people living in cities. This means that we're going to need more energy. There's going to be more waste. We have a growing middle class, which means that there's going to be more people who have more money, and they could spend that money in products and solutions that are more sustainable. And then we have looked at what are the big concerns that people have. And they talk about plastic waste issues. They talk about climate change. They talk about water pollution, air pollution. And yes, I fully agree, again with Julius. I mean, we used to think that, water, not an issue here. It's a problem somewhere far away. First of all, there is no far away, we're one planet. But now it's so visible. Already in Central Europe, we cannot make our logistics in the more sustainable manner using boats because there's no water in the rivers. So this is really starting to have an impact on the way that we run our normal businesses. Investors are very, very active on sustainability. I keep saying that our head of investor relations is my best friend because we spend so much time together. We have a lot of investors that want to have really, really, really detailed information on our sustainability performance and also how our investments are supporting those targets. We have a new CFO, and I also told him when he started that he can expect to become my best friend as well. And we are now really looking at, we need to be reporting on all of these things. It's part of our financial reporting, it's part of our board review. So there is really this enormous amount of work going on at the moment in trying to make sure that the money speaks sustainability as well. And I think this is very welcome. Here we can just see that, because some people feel that the whole climate stuff, it's just so Central European and the rest of the world doesn't care about it. That's not true anymore. If you look at investors, for example, most of them have committed to having a net zero portfolio, meaning that if your company is not transforming, they will be kicked out of the investor's portfolio. And that's not great. We, for example, at Neste, we have a lot of ESG funds as our owners. If they feel that we're not delivering, they will drop us, and that will have a significant impact on how the company is valued. So out of all of these external messages, so really understanding what is expected of us, came our sustainability vision. And we published this at our Capital Markets Day last year. And I like to highlight this because Capital Markets Day means that this was presented by our CEO to his key stakeholders. It means that this really is at the heart of the strategy. So this is where we say that we're going. This is our ambition. When people ask me, do I have a clear roadmap for all of these things? No, not yet. But I have a clear idea on where to start, and that's important. And it's also really, really important that you don't just say something because it sounds nice, but you need to have a credible way of going forward. So climate has been top of mind for many people for a lot of time already. We've had our climate strategy for quite some time already, but we felt that we needed to take the extra step, not just talk about what it is that we do ourselves, but also how can we work together with our value chain. We're now talking to our suppliers, we're talking to our logistic partners. What can we do to bring down the emissions in the overall value chain? We're looking at biodiversity. And this is complicated. If people thought that climate was going to be complicated, think about a topic where there is no agreement on how to measure it. So I had a lot of fun going to our board of directors with this idea that, hey, let's make a target on biodiversity, but I don't know what I'm going to be measuring. Luckily, they also felt that we had enough proof that this is what is expected of us. And right now we're working together with many different organizations that are helping us understand. Are we measuring the same things in Finland as we are in Asia or the US? Probably not. How do we set the targets for a global company when the metrics may be different? We're working on that. Human rights, again, another topic that for a long time people felt that human rights violations, they probably happen somewhere really far away, and it doesn't really show in our everyday activities. Now, if you've been reading newspapers for the past year or two, it's quite often an article about something that happened close to home. It's been ethnic restaurants in Finland. It's been some of the grocery chains that have had issues with their tomatoes or whatever. good, reputable Finnish companies as well, and suddenly they realize that, whoops, there may be something that we need to do about it. There's also going to be a lot of legislation coming, so either you do it voluntarily, or then you do it because you have to. And I quite often say that these 4 topics, there's actually 3 content topics, and then there's the raw materials and the supply chain. This is where we need to make it all happen. We can't change all of these things by just working with ourselves. So we really are looking at how can we involve our suppliers, our customers, our partners, so you can all expect to, hear from us again if you want to do business with us as well. So I said that climate has been there for quite some time. So we've been saying that we have the carbon handprint. I'm not going to do my dance, but honestly, I have come up with the dance to explain to our leadership as well that what do I talk about when we talk about carbon handprint, and what do I talk about when we talk about carbon footprint. But the idea is carbon handprint is the positive impact that when a customer starts using a renewable product and replaces a fossil product with that, the difference in the greenhouse gas emissions, that is the positive impact, that is the carbon handprint. So we want to grow, so handprints up. And then the carbon footprint is the greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted in our production or in our operations. So that's the footprint. So footprints down. So we want to minimize that. So we have said that we want to have carbon neutral production by 2035. And remembering that we are still an oil refining company, this is a very bold promise. And here I am extremely proud of the way we did this. We actually have a roadmap. We know exactly how to get there. We have made plans on what needs to happen this year, what needs to happen in 5 years' time. We've changed the way we invest our money. Because when we had a workshop on what can we do to make this happen, and we had all these people from production lines and R&D and business units and everywhere, and we started asking, so what could we do? And then there was this wonderful person who said, are we allowed to dream? And I said, yes, this is where we dream. And at the end of the workshop, we start asking, what are the problems? And I started asking, because some of the ideas are quite simple. We need to be more energy efficient in our processes. We need to use renewable electricity. We need to electrify certain things. Why haven't we done these things already? And the answer was that because our investment criteria are not supportive of these kind of activities. So we changed our investment criteria. So nowadays, when we decide on an investment, we need to show its impact on greenhouse gas emissions. We also changed our way of calculating the investments. So we now have an internal price on carbon. So basically, we are putting our faith in the fact that in the future, polluting will cost more. Our head of investment management thinks that we are actually predicting or rather setting the standards, because when we set our first internal carbon price, the EU ETS was 20 euros. It is now close to 80. It seems to be following every internal carbon price that we set. So we need to keep updating it to keep up with what's actually happening out there in the world. But these are really concrete examples why I said that, the finance world will need to start paying attention to what happens in the sustainability world. So these are no longer 2 separate worlds. And now with the vision, we also said that we want to be leading this transformation in our value chain. So this is why we're now working on finding the first suppliers who want to pilot with us, and then see how can we start setting targets also for our suppliers so that they can also start taking action. Am I still more or less talking about what I promised to talk about? Good, good. So I said that I'm so proud of our roadmap. So this is a shortened version of it, but it's really important to understand that there is the roadmap of things that we do internally. And then looking at what is feasible. So it is possible to start renegotiating electricity contracts, so done. It is possible to start implementing some of these energy efficiency improvements, so done. Some of them are bigger, so they needed to be tied with our turnaround schedules. So when we know that there's going to be a turnaround, these are the things that we can implement in that turnaround, so put on the plans. Then there are some things where We know the technology is not yet ready. We know that the infrastructure might not be ready. So looking at green hydrogen, looking at carbon capture and utilization. So we're starting piloting. We know that we need to pilot first. We need to find a partner to pilot with so that we can actually start having the benefits around 2030. So this is why it's important that you start early, because big transformation like this, it doesn't happen overnight. And it's also so important that you're able to give a credible explanation on what it is that you're really working on. How are you making these things happen? But some of these things are also needing of changes in the external environment. So what is the business environment that is supportive of this change? So we also need to talk to the policymakers. And yes, I'm a former lobbyist, so this is my favorite topic. But we also need to really, really explain that there may be taxation problems. There may be need for more incentives for companies that are making these things. There may be more need for supporting R&D and innovation. I can't speak anymore. So that there will be these new technologies available. So all of this, again, important not just to keep doing all these wonderful things with your own colleagues, but really reaching out to the rest of the world and making sure that this is not sustainability team only. I mean, I have the most wonderful, capable, inspiring team in the world, but we cannot make this change. It needs to be on everybody's agenda. So now when we talk about our climate strategy, we have this massive sheet that I called Häkkyräkalvo. Apologies for those who don't speak Finnish, but I have no way of translating that. But basically it has 80 names on it. We have 100 different initiatives ongoing. And it's my job to make sure that all these 80 people, they are moving forward with the initiative that they are controlling so that I can report back to our executive committee every second month on how well we are on track with all of these activities. So this is really running a big, big thing, not just something nice and fluffy. And so it's really important that you have also the support of your communications functions, your HR. How do we incentivize people? How do they understand that this is now part of their priorities? Because quite often people are like, yeah, my job is to sell. Yes, but it might mean that you also need to do other stuff to be able to sell. So making that change in everybody's heads is really crucial. So I decided that, this may sound like insane. So I give some simple examples of what it means. So for example, yes, we have 100 different initiatives, but we've started with, the simple ones. But it really annoys me when people just, every company in the world is now saying that, we're going to electrify everything and we're going to use renewable electricity. Yes, but where is this coming from? So we also need to make sure that we actually have enough renewable electricity available. Here comes the who do you work with? This is why we made power purchase agreements also for new renewable electricity plants or wind farms, or how do we make sure that there is enough of this available? But this is also something that we need to communicate to the policymakers. Who's going to make sure that the infrastructure is out there so that all of these transformations can happen? So luckily, we have been able to do this rather quickly. We've been able to find partners, so we are now ahead of our schedule. It is trickier in Singapore, I can tell you that, than in Finland to start using renewable electricity. Singapore, as you may know, is quite small, not a lot of room for massive wind farms or solar panel farms, but we found a way. We'll find a better way as we move forward. And then biodiversity. I said this is more complicated. So we've said we want to be net positive, so that out of our activities, there would actually be a positive impact on the nature around us. And that's quite a bold promise. And this is why we've also started looking at who can help us make this happen, but also how can we make sure that we know what it is that we're measuring. With climate, everybody's talking about science-based targets initiative, but these don't really exist for biodiversity. There is now a science-based targets for nature initiative that we're participating in. We're piloting another methodology in Porvoo and Naantali. And then we have actually started partnering with an NGO called Fauna and Flora International. They are real experts on biodiversity, and we we just asked for help, basically. And first they said, we're not sure we want to work with you. So while we are always doing scrutiny on our suppliers and really a lot of due diligence, they wanted to do due diligence on us to see if we are credible enough, if we're nice enough. And I was so happy when they came to us and said, you're probably among the nicest companies that we work with. So that was a positive thing. But really, they also have people that have this mentality that I think we all need. How can we solve some of these big issues that the world is facing? So I'm hoping to be able to share big stories on this in a year's time or so. But so far, we've made good progress in at least setting some intermediate targets in terms of finding out what are the right metrics. How do we measure? What do we talk about? How do we raise awareness? And this is why one of the activities that we have, as funny as it sounds, we have our own bees in front of our headquarters. And I fought for the bees for 2 years, and people were telling me that you're insane. I mean, everybody's going to say that this is greenwashing and this is stupid and who cares about the bees? But I felt that, we need to have something that catches people's attention. So now when you come to the Neste headquarters, there's a window overlooking the sea, but there's also bees' nest. And then we have a sign explaining that this is how we want to also encourage biodiversity. We want to raise awareness. This is sort of like, ilmanen ämpäri kind of thing, where you get people to pay attention because you're offering them something easy. Of course, it cannot be the only activity. For us to say that, we have a huge biodiversity vision and then we have some business, not enough. But, think about how do you make people understand what it is that you're trying to do. Give them something that is understandable. Me talking about metrics and weird targets somewhere far away might not sound interesting, but everybody understands when they see the bee's nest, and they understand when we say that we're going to be harvesting and there's going to be enough honey for everybody. So think about how you can make sense to your colleagues. The human rights stuff, it's such a wide topic, so we needed to really look at what it is that we want to be focusing on first. So we wanted to talk about responsible recruitment. And this is especially an issue when you have a lot of migrant workers. Again, you might think that, an issue for somewhere far away. There has now been a massive scandal in Europe just a few weeks ago with a big, respectable company that realized that when they are doing construction or these turnarounds, they actually have workforce coming from different parts of the world who may have to pay for the right to go and work. And this is a huge problem. So we've also tried to join forces with other big companies to help us solve a systemic issue. It's not something that we can solve on our own. We have also said that we want to ensure that everybody in our value chain is paid living wages. And this is something that colleagues at Neste always find intriguing. You know that most people feel that I don't get paid enough. So we're actually starting by looking at our own wages. Do we meet with the living wages criteria at Neste? And then we're looking at at our suppliers, at our contractors, etc. And given our purpose, creating a healthier planet for our children, we also wanted to have something that reminds us that if we want to solve some of the big systemic problems in the world, we need to be able to help children have access to education. And sometimes people ask me, how is this relevant to our business? I think it's fairly relevant. We also have crop-based raw materials. So workers living on plantations normally bring their families. Isn't it somehow our responsibility to ensure that the children who are living there, they have access to schooling instead of working on the fields? So I think, again, a super relevant topic. I said that we need to find partners. We're fairly small. I mean, we're 5,000 people working globally. Yes, we can have an impact, but if we want to have a massive impact, we need to find people with more muscle. So we are, for example, joining forces with Unilever. They have many practices that are very similar to what we're trying to do, and they have this social promises program, which we have signed up to. And it's been really nice being able to talk to their experts, seeing that they have similar goals, and they also have similar supply chains. So we are trying to make a massive change, so find out who you can join forces with. Don't try to, fix the world on your own. And then, because we have a lot of these asks, I said that we have 3 content pillars, and then we have the how to deliver it, so supply chain. Of course, we need to make sure that this is somehow systematically part of our supplier activity. So it's not about our sustainability people going to our suppliers' sustainability people and say, hey, how about we do something? But we want to make sure that this is part of how we do business. So it's in our supplier requirements, it's in our contracts, it's in our terms, how we do business. It's a part of how we try to grow our raw material pool. So I have a colleague called Diego, who's trying to come up with new raw materials, sourcing from new regions in the world, and then there's me who's trying to say that, there are these sustainability risks, and then we need to mitigate these sustainability problems. But I also try to explain that the whole sustainability vision, it's actually made for Diego, because we're trying to make sure that it's not that we have good sustainable practices and unsustainable practices, but we're trying to make sure that everything that we do is done in a way that is sustainable. And this is super relevant. We can't just imagine that we will stop all kinds of businesses because these businesses are not good. We need to find a way of meeting the needs of those 9 billion people. And for that, we need businesses that are run in a sustainable manner. So we have a supplier code of conduct. I'm sure you've come across a few supplier code of conducts. We keep updating ours so that it has always slightly more demanding sustainability criteria. We're now looking at how can we make the currently, I call them fluffy, but maybe call them soft climate targets a little bit more tangible. Obviously, this will take time. We're not expecting anybody to change the way they act or do their business overnight. And this is also fundamentally important. We can set targets, but we need to understand that we need to take time to achieve those targets. Like I talked about the transformation of Neste, it took around 10 years before the renewable business even started looking like a business. So it's not for the impatient. I have no patience, so I'm struggling sometimes, but I have turned this into when you have no patience, things start happening. So I'm trying to find a positive angle. So sustainability, it's everything. And a lot of people are like, there's so much of it, how do I know what to deal with? And every time I try to do something, somebody's saying that you should be focusing on something else, or you talk about your climate stuff and people come and complain that you're not doing enough on water. So what do you do? So typically it's a good idea to do what we call a materiality assessment. So what are the most relevant sustainability issues for your business? So looking at both the sustainability impact, but also the business impact. And this is something that we do every 2 years. So this is now 2 years old because I haven't yet gone to our executive committee with the new one. I'm going next week. So next week this will look slightly different, but not very different. It's also very important to understand that it's unlikely that your priorities keep changing. But it's quite likely that the expectations of the external world are changing. So it's good to have this sort of outside-in check every now and then to make sure that you're still relevant. Because we quite often tend to think that we know everything, we're right on track, but the world keeps changing. So it's really important that you understand how your business is finding its role in the society. There's a framework that most of you probably have come across with, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is also a good way of maybe looking at what are the big issues that the world needs to have solved. And then try to see how your business has a role in that. Typically, I would say that having 3 to 6 SDG, Sustainable Development Goals, that are priorities for you is good. Now we have way more than that. So this is where my team was able to convince me that we have a significant impact on many, many different issues, and we do. But it's really important that you don't just, take them all and say that, we have a link to something and then say that we're part of solving every problem that the world has. Try to make sure that your most material topics, your key SDGs, and your main targets are somehow aligned. These are the basis for our target setting. This is what we report on in our sustainability report, which is part of our annual report, which is, again, has a strong link to our financials. So there needs to be some credible way of showing that these are all linked, they all make sense. And I said that, we can't change the world on our own. So finding good partners is critical. And I'll give you an example of something that is both a sustainability transformation as well as a business transformation. So, like I said, we created new products. We have sustainable aviation fuel. And people are like, what is that? So can planes actually fly on something that is not based on fossils? So we needed to have somebody who was willing to test it so that we would get approval. So we needed to work with, airplane engine manufacturers. We needed to work together with airplane manufacturers. And then we needed to find an airline that actually said that, okay, hey, we'll use it, we'll pilot it. We needed to find an airport where we could actually make this product available. And this is where you start seeing names like AirBP. And people are like, aren't they your competitors? Yes, they also sell aviation fuel, but they also control the infrastructure. So if you want to get your product to the airports where the planes can actually use it, you need to find a way of actually working with your competitors. Then you needed to see, okay, we've had it in Oslo, we've had it with Lufthansa, we've had it at a number of European airlines and airports, so what's next? We need to go to the US, finding new airlines that have never heard of Neste. So bringing a new solution from a weird company, from a tiny little country, far away somewhere in Northern Europe, you needed to also be able to explain what is it that you're bringing to the table, why is it relevant for that partner as well. And we have been very successful in convincing companies, big airlines, big oil companies, but it has taken quite a long time. As you can see, bringing this aviation fuel globally to the market has taken us 10 years. So again, don't be discouraged. There are steps along the way. Celebrate those steps. And then see, where do we go next? So we're now looking at new kinds of airlines. People are like, EasyJet. Sustainable aviation fuel is quite expensive. We need to make sense for people who want to fly. Why should they pay more? What are they paying for? So it's a big struggle also in trying to explain, not just to the end customers, but to everyone in between. And then when we were pretty sure that we have something good to offer, the pandemic hit. Airlines had no money. And we felt that we still needed to bring this aviation fuel to the market. And then we looked at all of these big companies, big corporations with their climate targets. And for a lot of them, they've also committed to reducing their what's called Scope 3 impact. So quite typically that includes business travel. So we looked at, what companies have all the money in the world and whose climate impact comes from travel. Big consultancies, big IT companies, big finance companies. And our first pilot for selling sustainable aviation fuel to corporate customer and not the airline was Boston Consulting. So this is something that I'm super proud of, that we've been able to actually develop a new business based on sustainability commitments. We've been creative in other partnerships as well. So for example, the city of Oakland, we collect the used cooking oil from the restaurants in that city, and then we turn that into renewable diesel, which is then used in the city logistics. So basically, the city is now running on its own used grease. So nice circular business example. We've done the same with McDonald's in the Netherlands and their logistics company Havi. So collecting the used cooking oil from frying your French fries, turning that into renewable diesel that is then used for the company logistics. And then with Finnair, this is my favorite. When we first came with our own climate strategy, and I wanted to do something that makes everybody see it internally. So I went to the CEO and I said, well, we kind of have people who feel bad about traveling. And then we have a sustainable aviation fuel that we could use. So instead of buying offsets for our business travel, couldn't we use our own product for our own business travel? And it would cost about 1 million. And then he thought about it for a minute and then he said, yes, let's do it. So we needed to then look at, where do we travel? This was pre-pandemic when we were still traveling. So where do we travel? Which airlines do we use? And then we are working together with Finnair so that, they are getting the sustainable aviation fuel with the price of a fossil fuel to cover for the business flights that our employees take. And now that we're flying again, this is becoming a really relevant service and something that makes everybody really happy. So I'm getting ready to wrap up and I still have time left, so this is unusual. Now I've lost, I think, the sound. But never mind, you probably can hear me anyways. So what do you have to do to be able to do a meaningful sustainability journey? Do I use this one now? Okay. So really, if you're talking about a real transformation, then sustainability needs to be at the core. It needs to be really the heart of your strategy. Our head of strategy probably has really, really black toes, because I keep stepping on them, but luckily he also feels that we are fundamentally trying to do the same thing. We are trying to make sure that the company is relevant also in the future. So really, make sure that this is how you look at your sustainability actions. And then don't be overwhelmed. You need to start somewhere. There's 1 million different things that you could do. Pick one, start doing it. Have a look at where you are today and then pay attention to the improvements that you're doing along the way. And then really look for those partners. Look at who you can work with to actually have that big impact. If you set your sight at, creating a healthier planet for our children or something like that, it's not going to happen unless you find somebody else to work with you. And this is basically my favorite weird slide. So if we're looking at continuing with business as usual, we're not going to see a healthy living planet for very much longer. So this is something that we all need to understand. We need to do things differently. It's not also enough that we do a little bit of a change. As lovely as my bees are, they are not going to change everything. So really think about how can we have the kind of breakthrough thinking that we can actually have a positive exponential impact. And for this, I think we need all the brains, we need all the ideas, and we really, really need to find a way to have good partnerships. So thank you.